So this is fairly simple. It's not a lot of graphics. It's not anything fancy. The idea is to be simple and straightforward. We'll start out with the national office staff. I'm the executive director, and I did say earlier that my job is to implement the vision that the executive committee outlines, and then also to manage the day-to-day operations of the institute. I'll also represent the institute from time to time on committees or at meetings, and when necessary, I can also speak on behalf of the institute when the executive committee feels that it's necessary that I do so. Wendy Davidson, you met earlier, our assistant director. She really is she's the person that makes the AIPG operate. She's in charge of payroll. She does a lot of work with respect to scheduling webinars and communications, putting together the e-news. She's really the right hand. She's what makes the organization go. Kathy Duran is our professional services manager. If you've been to an AIPG meeting and you've seen how well organized they are, that's because Kathy is fantastic at that job. She also does a lot of work that's unseen. Our database is fairly sprawling, and Kathy's the one who really is responsible for making sure that the database operates properly and that the individual records are working the way they should. And if we do end up needing to query the database, to ask a question to the database, she's often the one that constructs those queries. Dorothy Combs is in charge of membership services. What that really means is that when a person applies for a CPG, Dorothy does the intake, communicates with the applicant, ensures that the pieces are present, and if they're not, communicates what's missing, and then shepherds that application through the review process. She's also responsible for providing answers to other organizations, whether it's a business, a regulatory agency, or another professional organization, when they need to know whether or not a member of AIPG is a CPG in good standing. And that happens more often than you might expect, because any certified professional geologist that's working on a mineral project for a publicly traded company could be working as a qualified person, and it's up to the company to ensure that they are a CPG in good standing. So we see that on a regular basis. She's also responsible for making the list of members in good standing that we need to put into place so that we comply with the Securities and Exchange Commission's SK 1300 guidelines that have been adopted, I guess, a couple of years ago to modernize and update the reserves and resource reporting for publicly traded for properties, mineral properties under publicly traded companies. Kathy Gleiber, she does anything that needs to be done. Her job is to assist all of us. It could be packing a box to go to an annual meeting. It could be answering the phone, stuffing envelopes, helping with any kind of printing or mailings. She is kind of a floater. I kind of think of her as a jack of all trades. So she's able to do a little bit of everything. Those 5 people are the 5 people that really make AIPG run. And I noticed there's one missing. I did not put Christy Valero in there. Christy is our bookkeeper. You really don't see her very often, but without Christy, our books would be a mess, and then financially we'd be in real trouble. So Christy's the person that's responsible for entering all of our inflow and outflow in terms of cash, and she works really diligently to make sure that we can account for every cent that comes into and out of AIPG right down to the penny. So there are 6 of us in the national office. Christy and Kathy are not full-time employees. Christy works 32 hours a week. Kathy works about 28. So we really have about 5.5 full-time employees in the office. The other 3 names that you see, oh my goodness. What in the world has happened here? The AASG administrative assistant, and I'm drawing a blank on her name, and so I couldn't remember it this morning when I was putting this together and up. We've recently hired her. So Wendy, if you could hop on and let me know, I'd appreciate it. We provide
Karen.
Karen.
It's Karen.
I never can remember, and I put that in as a shorthand today. We provide managerial services for the Association for Women Geologists, and the Association of American State Geologists. For AWG, we manage their database. We really manage a lot of their billing, and we cash flow transactions. Mona Scott works directly for them. She works about 20 hours a week. Karen Courtney, I think is her last name now. She works about 10 hours a week for AASG, and that's kind of an average. So it could be that one week she works a couple of hours and the next week she works 13 or 14, but we tend to think about 10 hours. And that can be providing things like assistance with setting up meetings, making phone calls to set up some of their visits to Capitol Hill, and just supporting AASG. And then also with AWG, we have something called the Advanced Geo Program, and that's a grant that AWG applied for. And as part of that grant, they have a full-time employee that administers that grant. And our job is to basically pay that employee. So that person works really for AIPG, but they're on soft money. And what they're doing is they're administering that grant program. Right. This is really the way the organization is laid out in terms of our organizational chart. I didn't update the national president this morning either, Shanna, so I apologize for the insult. But Shanna Schmitt, it would be my direct supervisor, although I serve at the pleasure of the executive committee. It's really the president that is my direct sort of day-to-day supervisor. We typically meet once a week. That may change a bit depending on workload for either of us, but we try to meet regularly just to stay abreast of any issues that may be impacting the Institute. Below me would be Wendy Davidson. She is our assistant director. And then below Wendy would be the other members of the AIPG National Office. And they're sort of all on the same level. It looks like Kathy Gleiber maybe would be under everyone else, but really she works wherever Wendy might direct her to work. So we have sort of a fairly vertically stacked organizational chart that's executive committee, executive director, assistant director, and then each of our individual AIPG staff. Earlier today, Jim Ridenour asked a little bit about whether or not we work directly with other organizations. We do have several mutual recognition agreements and memoranda of understanding. That's what an MOU actually stands for. The recognition agreements allow us to have reciprocal recognition of our credential with other professional organizations. So if you hold the CPG in good standing, you can apply for the professional title that's equivalent to the CPG but offered by the other organization. And you can do it in a streamlined fashion, typically with a 1 or maybe 2-page application that's then by the executive director of the particular organization, since it goes both ways. If a CPG is applying for recognition under another organization, I would have to ensure that you are a CPG in good standing. And if someone with the European Federation of Geologists was applying for their CPG, then my counterpart at EFG would vet their application and let us know that they were a Euro geologist in good standing. We really have 3 of these mutual recognition agreements. So one is with the European Federation of Geologists, and that's for the Euro Geol title. That's recognized in 26 countries in Europe. I don't know the list off the top of my head, but it would include countries as far east in Eastern Europe as Ukraine. It'll be recognized by the folks in Serbia, the Croats, the Italians. So most of Europe then would be recognized as the EuroGeol. So your CPG can be used to get the EuroGeol title should you need one. And then with the Geological Society of London, that's the Chartered Geologist title. That's actually chartered under a royal charter, so by royal decree. And then the Institute of Geologists of Ireland with their PGO title. And that's recognized just throughout the Republic of Ireland. We also have memoranda of understanding with the Society for Mining, Metallurgy, and Exploration, that's SME, and we work directly with them on joint programming. So if the SME has a local meeting like they have in Minnesota, and you would like to be able to do something in conjunction with that meeting, reach out to the national office, and under that memorandum of understanding, we can make that process a bit easier and maybe get something formally on the agenda for that particular meeting. We just completed and signed one with Women in Mining. I think that happened about the second week of January. And we have one with the Western Museum of Mining and Industry. We're also working on memorandum of understanding with the Mining and Metallurgical Society of America and with the European Federation of Geologists to go beyond just simple title recognition so that we can work more closely in some of the international spaces, especially as the minerals industry becomes more and more global. AIPG also represents you on national committees. We do have 2 seats on the Federal Advisory Committee to the National Cooperative Geologic Mapping Program. If you're not necessarily interested in being a section officer, when these seats become available, if you think this is something that you would be interested in, please reach out to me. And if one of these seats becomes open, I will be more than happy to sort of foster that nomination process. That is a presidential appointment. So sometimes what seems like it could be pretty straightforward because of the way the federal government works can take some time. It took about 18 months for the last person to be appointed to that committee to actually take their seat. We also have representation with the United Nations Economic Commission on Europe. That's the UNECE. They have a classification system for mineral projects, and we are represented on both the Minerals Working Group and the Professional Development Working Group. The people that do it typically remotely. And so again, if this seems like something that you would like to be involved in because of your expertise and interest, reach out to me. I know that the Minerals Working Group is looking for additional members with expertise in any aspect of the minerals world, whether it's dimension stone, aggregate, or metallic minerals. Okay, so what is it that really will make your life easier as a section officer? One of the things is all the things that the national office can help do for you. This list is not exhaustive, but certainly, that's not what I meant to do. Certainly we can talk about other items. So as we talk about some of these services, if you have questions, feel free to throw in the chat, and I'll try to answer them. We can do web hosting if it comes right down to it. We typically would try to do that as a separate page under the national AIPG page. So if you want your own separate AIPG section page, we might not be the best choice. But if what you want is a page that you can navigate to directly from the national office, we can set that up. We're outstanding at meeting planning, and I don't say that to brag. I say that because it's just a fact. Between the skill that Kathy Duran brings to the table and the experience that Kathy and Wendy have, we can assist with any kind of meeting planning for you. And that means something as simple as helping you to plan a field trip, contracting for buses or contracting for meeting space, to working directly with a section to plan professional development or workshop opportunity. As an example, we've worked directly with Wisconsin to put together a PFAS seminar. It was incredibly successful, and it netted several $1,000s for Wisconsin. So if there is a subject in your section that you think geologists could benefit from a day-long workshop, if you have the ideas, we have the expertise to help make that a reality. And we assume the financial liability. So we're willing to front that money for you. We'll take a pretty good piece on the back end, but that limits the liability that the section might have. So if the meeting doesn't go well, it doesn't exhaust your cash reserves. This is the time of year when members either forget to pay their dues, or they're not sure if they want to pay their dues, or quite frankly, they're having to pick and choose whether or not which professional organizations they may want to be a member of. If you need a list of active members or a list of members that haven't paid dues yet because you really want to reach out to them and encourage them to stay involved in AIPG, send us an email and we can put that list together for you with all the contact information. We don't have to plan the event for you. We can just manage the registration. So it's another thing that we're pretty good at. If you've got the event put together and you need someone to manage the registration, do the billing, make sure that uh, the badges are made and shipped out, we can do that as well. Our Zoom platform, we can host up to 500 people at once on Zoom. So if you're thinking that you want to have an online section meeting, we can certainly set that up for you and act as the host. We typically even will have one of the national office staff be available kind of for troubleshooting just in case something were to go wrong with Zoom. So keep that in mind if you're finding that you want to have a webinar or a section meeting electronically, please reach out to us. If you do a professional development opportunity in your section, I strongly encourage you to work with our education committee to have it certified for CEUs. This will open it up and make it attractive to more than just members of your local section, especially if you take all the steps that are necessary to get it certified for continuing education in New York. So it can really enhance attendance. And we do charge a fee for it because it takes time, energy, and effort. And so all we try to do is recoup costs. The few tens of 15s, 20 minutes to an hour that it might take us to get that process done. But we do that at the in-house rate rather than what we would charge a third party. Okay. We can also give you a speaker list. So we can give you a list of potential speakers if you're interested in putting together some sort of a seminar, webinar for your particular section. We can help you identify potential speakers. There are a lot of topics that we can cover in addition on a kind of an as needed basis. So we can't really cover everything, but if you come up with a question and you're not sure how to answer it, we want the national office to be your first phone call as a section officer. If you're not sure about insurance, if you don't understand whether or not you should purchase the liability insurance, we're going to talk about this, but should I purchase the liability insurance if I rent a car for the section? If you're not sure, pick up the phone, call us. We're more than happy to try to do that. We can also assist your section if registration in your state comes up for sunset review, or if there's legislation introduced that might change registration or seek to eliminate it. So we're more than happy to help with that. We do have some boilerplate language. We also have access to some resources, and we're more than happy to share the letters of support that we have written for other sections in the past so that you can get an idea of what those things look like. If you're having a section event and you want some AIPG swag to give away, give us a call. Some things we'll just absolutely mail to you for free. Other things, because of the cost, we'll send them to you at our cost. We don't try to make money off the backs of the sections. We're simply just trying to cover our costs. So if you find that you're going to have something together, you're going to be getting something together, or you're going to attend a meeting that's in your area. So just as an example, I saw Alice First was on earlier today. I know Alice is from Missouri. If Alice is going to go to the Geological Society of America North Central, South Central meeting in Springfield in April, and she wants some AIPG swag to give away, all she needs to do is send us an email and we'll deliver it. Shoot, I'll probably pack it up and carry it down because I'll be going to that meeting. I see a question that says, can anyone suggest speakers? Absolutely. If you have a speaker in mind that you think would be great to put on the AIPG speaker list, we would love to hear from you. So certainly you can email me directly. You can email Wendy. You can reach out to Shanna and let us know if you have a speaker that you think would be outstanding for AIPG's speaker list. AIPG also has a national scholarship program, and this is something for section officers to be aware of because we often have more qualified applicants than we have scholarships. And when that happens, if we see an outstanding applicant from Michigan, we'll send that person's application materials to Michigan because we know that Michigan may be interested in providing a scholarship. If we see an outstanding applicant from Missouri and Missouri has an interest, we'll send that to the Missouri president and say, hey, this person was the 13th on our list of 12 recipients. It's an outstanding application. If you have a scholarship available, this person might be someone to consider. So we're more than willing to help and share that information. We also want you to communicate to your students when you talk about why AIPG is important as a student. Well, this is one of the reasons. I mean, we give away up to $20,000 a year. The undergraduate program can be as much as $16,000 in any given cycle. And the amounts vary, and we've seen amounts as small as $1,000 to as large as a $3,000 scholarship. It'll really depend on the amount and quality of the applications. It's fairly straightforward. They have to be a student member of AIPG, but that's free. It's no pay to play. If you fill out the application to be a member and then fill out your application for the scholarship. And it's just an application and then an essay. And the essay topic is usually selected by the education committee, and so that it varies a little bit from year to year. We also have a graduate scholarship. It's named in honor of Bill Shook, the past executive director of AIPG. Typically, that's $2,000, although recently the foundation has decided to increase that number. I don't know what the top end number is going to be yet, but I do know that that will be increasing over the next couple of years to a more robust figure for graduate students. This is just for graduate students. Typically, we give away one per year, and it also requires an application and an essay. And you may interact with students, and you may find that they're reticent to apply. I think in my interaction with students, they feel as though there are probably going to be several hundred applications for 8 or 10 scholarships. And for AIPG, that's simply not true. We usually get around 40 applicants for the undergraduate program and less than 10, fewer than 10 for the graduate scholarship. So if you apply, the odds are good. They'll be in your favor. All right, here's the meat, the bread and butter. One of the things that I often am asked when I talk to people who are new to section leadership is really, what are their responsibilities? Now, the AIPG bylaws actually delegate authority to the sections to determine the responsibilities of each officer. So it's really up to you to look and see if there are any section bylaws that govern a particular officer position. However, there are some things that are generally uniform. President generally speaks for the section. Now, how they speak or what they can speak about may vary. For example, in Colorado, if you speak on behalf of the section, the executive committee, the section executive committee has to kind of outline what their position is based on a poll of the membership. That's exactly what the Colorado bylaws say. So it may be difficult for you to speak on a topic unless the membership has been polled on that topic. So you'll want to be clear. Typically, as president, you're the spokesperson for the meetings. You preside over the section meetings. And according to AIPG's national bylaws, you're supposed to conduct your meetings according to Robert's Rules of Order. So we can play a little bit fast and loose with those sometimes, but generally speaking, you want to make sure that you have someone on hand who has at least rudimentary knowledge. The president can direct section activities, or they can delegate those activities. And I can't stress enough how important it is to be willing and able to delegate. There are some things that as section president, it might not be the best expenditure of your time. You may find that it's better to delegate that to someone else. In addition, the section president serves as the section delegate to the AIPG Advisory Board. Each fall at the AIPG annual meeting, we have an advisory board meeting, and the section president would serve as that delegate unless they choose to nominate or select someone else to serve on their behalf. And in a little bit, we'll talk about why that might be important. So if the president can't attend, they can say to the VP, hey, I can't go to the annual meeting in Durango this year. I'm really bummed about that. Would you be able to attend in my place? Doesn't have to be the VP. It could be someone who's not even on the section executive committee. but the president or the section executive committee can delegate that position. Vice president, primarily, you're there to serve if the president can't. If the president can't attend a meeting, they become incapacitated, they're sick, they're ill. You serve in the president's stead, and then you may perform other duties as directed by the president. And that really depends on how active your section is and what you might have going. Secretary is pretty straightforward. You take notes and record the minutes of the second section executive committee meeting. And the important one here is the second one. So if you're thinking about being the secretary for your section, one of the critical pieces is to prepare the annual section activity report that gets submitted to the national office at the annual meeting. That's going to be due 2 weeks prior to the meeting date. So the Saturday of the annual meeting is when we have that executive committee meeting. This report's going to be due Friday, 2 weeks before that. So put that in your mind right now. If you're not sure on what those dates are going to be, the annual meeting dates should be up on the website. The Saturday beforehand, go back 2 weeks and you'll want to have that report prepared and in. Treasurer, I saw Stephen Stokowski asked about this earlier. First and foremost, you manage funds and accounts. Now, that's basically you're managing the section's bank account or accounts should they have one. Your responsibility essentially is to make sure the book's balanced. You will provide an annual treasurer's report to the national office, and that report needs to have in it the I think my headset just failed. Can you guys hear me?
Yep, I could hear you.
That's strange. So you'll have to have the details of the accounts, the amount of monies that come in, the amount of monies that come out, and the rough expenditures, because each section is set up as an individual 501c6, and each section has to file a 990 IRS tax return. Now, we do that for you, but in order for us to do that, we have to have a treasurer's report that shows the amount of money that came in, the amount of money that came out, and the amount of money on hand so that we can fill that out properly. So, Stephen, I know you had this question. That's going to be one of the most important things, is to give the correct information to the national office so that we can file your 990. You'll work directly with Christy to do that. And if she has any questions, she's going to reach out to you and tell you either what she doesn't understand or what she might need. And then our accounting service, Mountain View Tax Preparation Service, will prepare that on your behalf at no cost. So we don't charge the section for filing their 990. And correct me if I'm wrong on that, Wendy.
Yeah, that's correct. We also need the end of year bank statement to match up with the balance of the report that's submitted.
So that's really going to be the most important thing for the treasurer of everything that you do, is providing that information. Because if we don't file that 990, two things happen. One, you start to get penalized for not filing, and the penalties can be, as we've learned, harsh. The second is that if you don't file a 990 for a long enough period of time, you lose your 501c6 status, and it's an absolute nightmare to get it reinstated. So of all the things, that's probably the single most important piece, is to ensure that we get those the bank statements that are going to allow us to fill out the 990 correctly. Some sections have other officers. They may have a parliamentarian, they may have a early career professional member, they may have a newsletter editor. So you'll want to look and see inside your section what those other offices are, and then what their responsibilities are, because those may vary from section to section. One of the other things that's really important is for your section to be heard at the annual meeting. We want to hear from you. It's important that the executive committee, that the national office staff are able to hear from your section on a regular basis so that we understand the challenges you may be facing and put ourselves in a position to assist whenever possible. We have regular executive committee meetings. It says 2 or 3 a year, but we've really been leaning toward 3 or 4 a year. And absolutely any member of AIPG is welcome to attend. But I strongly encourage every section to delegate one person that attends these meetings whenever possible, especially the meetings that have a virtual component. It's easy enough to get online for an hour or 2 or 3, or as long as you can, so that you can be heard. We also have advisory board members of the executive committee. Now, these are members of the advisory board, and remember the delegates to the advisory board, there's one for every section, so there are 36, potentially 36 members of the advisory board. They select 4 from among that group of 36 to serve on the National Executive Committee. Those 4 members bring section concerns to the National Executive Committee whenever possible. They can be your voice, and they can also be your eyes and ears so that you can take back to the section big sort of national level initiatives that we're undertaking. Advisory board members vote. They are able to influence the policies of the national organization. And it's very important that we get that information. Advisory board members may chair committees, whether it's a standing committee or an ad hoc committee, provided that they meet any other criteria. So just as an example, for some committees to be the chair, you have to have a CPG. There is a caveat, and that caveat is that no 2 members of the executive committee may be from the same, it says state, but it really should read same section. So as an example, right now, Shanna is national president. That would mean that this fall, because Shanna will be past president for the next year, so this fall we couldn't have an advisory board member from Minnesota because Shanna already represents the Minnesota section. Similarly, with Sarah coming on, she's going to be president next year. This fall, we won't have anyone from Michigan who could stand to be an advisory board representative. There are 2 exceptions to that rule. One exception is that the editor may be from the same section. So it's okay that Adam Heft is the editor of the TPG because the editor's position is exempt. Adam's from Michigan. Sarah's also from Michigan. Similarly, the early career professional is exempt. So with Shanna being on the executive committee next year, if our new ECP member happens to be from Minnesota, that won't be a problem. That's really important because when you come to the annual meeting and you're thinking about nominating someone from your section or nominating your section president to be a member of the advisory board, be a member of the executive committee, you really need to check and see what the composition is going to be with respect to which sections will be represented, because you may find that you're not able to nominate someone that year. And I think that was put in place primarily to ensure that the larger sections didn't have a over or an undue influence, say, over the policies and initiatives that the AIPG National Executive Committee undertook. These executive committee meetings are open to everyone. And it's not just AIPG members. They are open to any interested party. We believe in transparency. The only exception to that rule is when we move into executive session. Those are sessions where we might be taking up a disciplinary matter, or we could be considering the CPG application of a person who was forwarded to us from the National Screening Committee. And in those cases, we can have PII, the personal identifying information that needs to be shared. Or if it's a disciplinary issue and no decision has been made, we want to keep that disciplinary issue private until the decision is made, because we don't want to unduly damage someone's career. So if we have that meeting and we find that there is no ethics violation, we could do more damage to that person's reputation if it becomes public that they were accused, even though later they were exonerated. So those are the kinds of things that would come up in executive session. We also have the monthly check-in meetings. Shanna mentioned those earlier. We typically don't conduct business there. If we do, we'll try to make sure and advertise that well in advance and get the agenda out well in advance. That is part of the bylaws, that we have to make the membership aware of anything the executive committee may vote on, any policy changes. But these meetings will tend to focus on one or two specific issues. And again, the advisory board members will perform the same duties as they do at the full meetings, but they tend to be limited to about an hour with a specific focus. This is a great place to bring up new topics, ideas, and initiatives. Some of the things that have come out of this in the past was the recent reimagining of the strategic plan. That really, I think that discussion got started in one of these monthly check-ins. Again, open to all members, and may also have an executive session if it's deemed necessary. We also have an annual transition meeting. So if you're thinking that you might want to stand for national office at some point, but you're really worried about how do you hit the ground running, right? What does it mean to be elected secretary, and then do you just get thrown into the lion's den? And the answer is no. We tend to have this meeting the second weekend in December. It's a couple of hours, and it's really designed to aid in transitioning from one executive committee to the next. So say you get elected to be secretary, the outgoing secretary will be there, and they will be there to talk to you about how they approached that position, what their duties and responsibilities were, make contact with you, and maybe even post-meeting be a sounding board for you so that you're not just dropped off with a suitcase in hand and just left on the side of the road. We also have an executive committee handbook, and Shanna did the most recent update. It's pretty fabulous, and it outlines all of those sort of roles, responsibilities, introduces you to our standing committees and our memoranda of understanding and the organization of AIPG. It's a compendium of everything AIPG. What we try to do at this meeting is to outline what we've done and also to introduce the new officers to what we'll be doing next year. And some of those things will continue. So we may have an initiative that started in 2023 that's going to continue into 2024, and we need the new members of the executive committee to be able to be up to date. There's also a Q&A portion, and I find this to be, as executive director, enlightening. It helps me learn a bit more about the new executive committee members coming in, how they think, how they function, what they value. And it can be entertaining sometimes because we learn little nuts and bolts and bits and pieces about each other that we might not have learned otherwise. We don't vote on issues there. There is no vote. We typically don't vote on anything there. We don't conduct the business of the Institute there. And it is not open to the public. This is just for those members that are going to be transitioning off the executive committee to be able to hand off to their replacements, to the people that are going to be coming in to do the work of the organization. And there's also not an executive session. So this is truly a transition meeting, the idea that we can pass off from one person to the next. This is a really important piece. In the past, we've had some confusion about electing people to the advisory board. And here's why. So every section nominates a delegate to the National Advisory Board. That's a separate meeting that happens during the Saturday before the annual meeting, typically. That's where earlier we said the president would be your delegate. And the president is considered your delegate unless you nominate someone else. They deliver the section activities report that the secretary prepares. The president delivers it at that meeting. Now, or not the president, the delegate delivers it. Could be the president, could be someone else. The delegate can also stand for election as one of the 4 advisory board representatives. And I said earlier that we can't have 2 members from the same section. You understand that. But in red, because this has been the confusing part, it is only the person named the delegate that can stand for election. So a few years back, we had president of a section serving as the delegate. They had another person with them who was attending the AIPG meeting, and they wanted to nominate the person that was attending with them to serve on the advisory, as the advisory board rep to the National Executive Committee. However, because they weren't the delegate, they had never been made the delegate for that section, they were unable to stand for election. And it was terribly disappointing because I think this was a person that would have done a great job. They would have easily been elected, but because of a procedural issue, they were unable to stand. So you need to be sure that if there's a person in your section that you think would be a great advisory board member to the National Executive Committee, make sure that they are the delegate for your section. Last year we had this happen, the same kind of an issue. Well, on the spot, the president just said, I hereby make so-and-so the delegate for this section. And we know that we can do that. We know that that's not a violation of the AIPG bylaws. So just be aware that you have to make sure that the person you want to nominate to be the advisory board rep to XCOM is actually the delegate in that meeting. All right, I'm going to let Wendy talk a little bit about bank accounts and whether or not you might need to do a Colorado DBA. And so, Wendy, if you want to take that over, and then when you're finished, I'll hop back in.
Yeah. I shouldn't take too long. The thing about bank accounts anymore is it's just gotten a lot more complicated and a lot more difficult just because of so much fraud through, the years. It's just gotten worse. So they're very careful, and it's a good thing, but it does make it more difficult at times. So it depends on the state, it depends on the bank. And if you need help, sometimes I've had to write a letter that authorizes that person has the right to do it. They're going to want to have your section bylaws generally. You want to have your section EIN number. Each section has their own EIN number, so you want to make sure to use that, not the nationals. They may want to see a meeting that you've done that says that it's been elected and it's authorized that this person can handle the funds for that section. So they do their due diligence to make sure that it is legit. And if you have any problems or questions, we can do whatever we can to help. We can give you some guidance from the different scenarios that we've seen from different states and different banks. Because even within Colorado, from working with First Bank to working with Wells Fargo to working with Southwest Bank, I mean, each one is different in how they handle their forms. But most of them are going to want, either you have an account at that bank personally, or you have to set up a profile within the bank, and then you're going to have backup of showing that you are authorized to manage the funds for that section, that state. So if you already have one, you should be fine. They usually want you to go in person when you change treasurers or any signers. They prefer you personally go into the bank to make changes. If it's not, it's a lot more work to get people changed out. And if you start a new account, it's a lot of hoops. So if it's possible, you're better off keeping the account your section has. But if you can, and it happens, just give us a call and we can give you some guidance. That's all I've got for now.
Thanks, Wendy.
You're welcome.
If you become a section officer, you will immediately become a target for scammers. Period. Scammers are going to come after you. And it's almost always the president and treasurer, although no one is immune. They take a lot of forms. So there are some things that are common. One of them is a request that says, here's an invoice. Please remit payment for whatever service we provided. And you click on the invoice and it downloads a worm into your email, and then it emails that invoice to everybody in your email contact list. So if you get a request for payment for an invoice you don't recognize, pick up the phone and see if you can find out if anyone made that request, if it's a company that they recognize or not. Second is request for gift cards. I can't tell you how many times a month we get a request that looks like it's from me or from Wendy or from Shanna, asking if you could get gift cards to so-and-so as a thank you. And then if you go and look at the return email address, it's not from Shanna Schmitt at gmail.com. It's from, I don't know, Lauren1234 at Hotmail. So it's an email address you don't recognize. We've had in the past requests that the national office or a section perform a wire transfer because an officer of AIPG that was traveling had an emergency. That's a scam. We're never going to ask you to wire money to an AIPG officer who's traveling. So if you see anything like that, verify the return address and then let National know when you get a new scam, because we will make everyone aware when a new scam comes out. You'll often see that these appear to originate from the national office, but National will never, ever ask you to buy a gift card, pay a bill, or wire money via just a simple email request. That's not what's going to happen. We will have been working with you directly on setting up a meeting. You will know that it's from us. We typically have a couple of set of eyes, so you may see Wendy and me. You know, the email comes from Wendy, but she CCs me. So you want to look for all those telltale hallmarks. We don't do this independently. It's not that Wendy's going to send it to you without letting me or Kathy or someone else know. So always check that return email address. And if you have anything that comes in that you're the least little bit suspicious of, pick up the phone and call. As a national officer or as a section officer, if you feel like you need our individual contact information, you can call the national office and Wendy knows to give you my personal cell phone so that you can call me directly if something like that comes up. The IRS 990 filings, our national accounting firm will file the 990 on behalf of the section, and we provide that service as no charge. I want to reiterate that so that you know that this is one of the things that we do for you. And we just need your treasurer to make sure we have what we need. Christy will communicate that to you. It's going to come out now. So if you're the section treasurer, expect shortly that Christy's going to have an email coming to you asking for specific bank statements and specific account balances. And I mentioned this earlier, I'm not going to beat you to death with it, but we don't want to become delinquent because it really is a pain in the backside once that happens. This is probably the second most commonly asked set of questions and probably the one we'll spend the most time on. And I know we're running a little short now, so I'll try to be brief. If you're a section officer, you are covered under an insurance policy carried by the AIPG National Office. Now, we do invoice that section, that coverage to the section. It's $100 a year, but it covers you for $1 million of personal liability. Okay, so if you are acting on behalf of AIPG and something happens and you end up being found liable, I don't know, maybe you slammed the van door on someone's hand as they were getting in and they had to have surgery and you were found liable of some kind of negligence. Our rider policy will cover you as long as you're acting on behalf of AIPG. All section officers are covered, as are other AIPG members who are performing services at the direction of the section or the national office. So if you're putting together a field trip and the field trip leader is not a section officer, they're still covered. You just need to note somewhere in an email, some official correspondence that says Doug Guzet is going to be leading this field trip for AIPG, and Doug Guzet will be covered. There are lots of things that are covered. Field trip leaders, attending chapter meetings, representing AIPG at meetings, or with not-for-profit groups. So say you're acting as an AIPG member, but you're helping the Boy Scouts of America get a merit badge. All of those things are things that will be covered under our umbrella. So if you're acting on behalf of AIPG as an officer of a section or as an individual member at the direction of a section, you're going to be covered by that AIPG liability umbrella. So here's some FAQs. One of the most common questions is, what happens if I use my personal vehicle to carpool for an AIPG field trip and I'm involved in an accident? Your personal insurance is the primary insurance. That's what happens. However, if your insurance coverage limit is reached, then the AIPG insurance will kick in. So you have multiple layers of insurance coverage in that instance. Second question, I carry personal liability insurance. How does that insurance work if I'm found liable for work I did for AIPG? In most cases, it's the AIPG liability insurance that will be the primary policy. And if the AIPG coverage is exhausted, then your personal liability umbrella will kick in. As an example, because I led field trips for so many years for students, and I still do that from time to time, I carry a $2 million personal liability umbrella. With the $1 million that AIPG carries, there'd be a total of $3 million of insurance, but it would be the AIPG umbrella that would kick in first. What if the section rents a van or a car to conduct AIPG business? Should we take the coverage offered by the rental company? The answer to that question is always yes. Always take that coverage, because AIPG insurance may or may not cover damage to the rental vehicle or for loss of use, depending on the laws in your state. So when in doubt, the answer to that question is always yes. Should I carry personal liability insurance? That's a question that you should answer after consulting with your own insurance agent. What I would say, and what our insurance company says, is if the nature of your volunteer work with AIPG routinely puts you in a position where you're responsible for the safety of others, you're regularly driving, personal liability insurance provides or can provide a substantial level of protection. So while we wouldn't say you need to carry it, we would say if you're responsible for people on a regular basis with what you do for AIPG, additional liability insurance can provide more protection. Is it better to hire a transportation company or to rent a van and have an AIPG member drive? Again, that's a dollars and cents kinds of question, but the one thing that it does when you hire a company is it shifts the liability from AIPG, either at the national or section level, to the company providing transportation services. Will you be covered if you're volunteering with another organization at the direction of AIPG? The answer to that question is yes. So if, for example, we ask you to work as the liaison to the campus visioning committee when SME decides whether or not they need a new building, if you're volunteering with them, you're covered. So if you're leading a workshop, if you're doing anything for another professional organization, but you're doing it at AIPG's request, you'll be covered. Okay, and we got there with 5 minutes to spare. If you have any questions, I'd be happy to try to answer them. Just feel free to speak up and we'll unmute you as we can. And I'm going to go ahead and see if I can figure out how to stop screen sharing. There we go.
As people are thinking of questions, I just wanted to put in a plug as part of the membership committee that if you need help coming up with ideas about section events or having technical talks or running a field trip or any sort of thing to kind of get your people reinvigorated and networking, just reach out, let us know, right? Anyone at the national office can plug you in with someone. And anyone on the XCOM can help too. So we're here to kind of help and bounce ideas off of each other.
But hey, one last thing. If you came into this hoping to learn something that I didn't cover, email me and tell me, and I'll make sure we get it in there so we cover it. This is it's an organic exercise, and we want to make sure we answer your questions.
No one's chomping at the bit. I'll say one more thing to fill the awkward silence, but I kind of hate. And that's the advisory board members have divided up into sections, so they'll be contacting you and asking you different questions about how your section's doing and different things like that. But if you have something you've been mulling about or you want to talk about before that happens, again, just let us know.
One other thing that just occurred to me because I saw Alice's name again. one of the questions that I often get is how we determine where we're going to have the annual meeting. And that typically comes from a section or members of a section having interest. And I think the most intimidating part of it is the idea of putting together a meeting and contracting with hotels and taking care of catering and contracts for buses and everything else is really intimidating and overwhelming.
Yeah.
The national office does most of that nuts and bolts work. We do the contracting. We locate the meeting space. We take care of all of the scheduling for buses and everything else. And then you do the visioning part. You come up with the theme. You identify what the theme sessions need to be. You outline what the great field trips in your area are going to be. I can't wait to go to Minnesota because Duluth is going to be fantastic. And I know the Minnesota section is going to have these wonderful field trips. So if it's been on your mind, why haven't we had a meeting in Georgia? Why haven't we had a meeting in Texas? Why haven't we had a meeting in Arizona? It's because the local section hasn't had the energy and interest in doing it yet. So if you think that's something you're interested in, reach out to me. Again, I'll talk to you about kind of how that works, because we recently have determined we're going to be able to do one in Missouri, and Matt Rhodes is going to chair that meeting. Chris Hogan is going to be the field trip chair. We're still looking for a couple of other people that would maybe be willing to help us with organizing the technical sessions and, really trying to drum up our sponsors and exhibitors. But we don't twist arms either, right? So we're not going to sit and come in and say, hey, you've got to do this. That's not how this is going to work. We want you to be able to help as much as you can, and not any more than that. We don't want it to be onerous or exhausting. There's too much history of sections putting on a meeting and then going dormant because it took so much energy, and we don't want that to happen. So if you're interested in maybe having a meeting in your region, reach out to us and we can start that dialogue. We're looking for the 2027 meeting. So we've got plenty of time, plenty of lead time to put that together.
We do. And it can be, doesn't have to follow a set formula, right? We have different types of meetings every year. So it doesn't have to be 2 days of technical talks. It can be just one day.
Absolutely. I think Durango is going to be 2 days of field trips and 1 day of technical talks because Durango is like the epicenter of outstanding field operations for geologists.
Bucket list for sure.
Yeah, absolutely bucket list.
Yeah. Mehmet, you bring up a good point. These have been well received, these section officer trainings. We're not necessarily going to hold it every quarter, but you can view it, the recording on YouTube eventually. The old one is up. But what we do plan on doing is having a town hall series specific to section officers. So there's a longer time that you can talk to each other and bounce ideas off each other outside of the annual advisory board meeting where you get like 3 to 5 minutes to talk about what your section has done in the whole year. So that'll be rolling out so that there will be some more dedicated time for the section interactions.
That's a really good idea, just because one of the things that I find when I see what sections are doing is that you guys do a lot of really innovative, interesting things. And the more you share those ideas, the more you can, spur interest and excitement and energy in another section. And they might become inspired by some of the things that you do. So that opportunity to chat 3 or 4 times a year is going to be really valuable. And our hour is up. So unless someone has a pressing question, I think that might do it for our section officer training.